This is Unit 5, Day 4, and we're starting out with conjugate radicals. So this is a really important word that we're going to talk about in a minute, so just pay attention to that. But it says, example 16, multiply and combine like terms, explain what you notice about the two different results. Okay, so this one looks like it's an exact match. So you have radical 3 plus radical 2 times radical 3 plus radical 2. So we're going to FOIL. So my first terms, I'm going to get just a 3, because radical 3 times radical 3 is just 3. My outers, I get plus radical 6. My inners, I get plus radical 6. And my last, it's positive times positive, and I get just a 2. Combining like terms, I'm going to get 5 plus 2 radical 6. And again, these match, so you keep and carry it. And there's really just a 1 out front, so 1 plus 1 is 2 radical 6. All right, the next one here. Now you should notice that they have opposite signs, okay, in the middle. So now let's watch what happens when I FOIL. So radical 3 times radical 3 is still a 3. My outers are going to give me negative radical 6. My inners give me positive radical 6. And my last, be careful, it's positive times negative, would be minus 2. I combine like terms here, and I get 1, and then all of a sudden that cancels. Okay? So this was the first, this was the last. The outers and the inners will always cancel each other out because they're opposites. Okay? This is called, or these I should say, are called conjugates. Conjugates, I spelled that completely wrong. There's no G. Sorry, guys. Conjugates is where they have opposite middle signs. Only their middle signs are opposite. Okay? So if you just look right here, this is square root of A plus the square root of B. Its conjugate is square root of A minus square root of B. Okay? These are called conjugates. The shortcut is only to do the first and the last. The outers and the inners in FOIL cancel. That will always work if they're conjugates. Okay? So now example 17 just says find the conjugate. Remember, you're changing this middle signs only. Okay, so the conjugate of this one will be the square root of 5 minus the square root of 11. This one is 9 plus square root of 11. This one is the cubed root of 3 minus 1.5. So you have opposite signs in the middle only. Example 18, find the product of each conjugate radicals. Again, only need to multiply first and last because outers and inners cancel. So this times this is my first. Radical 5 times radical 5 is 5. And then my last, I have positive times a negative. So it's always opposite sign. So it's always going to be a minus. And then I'm going to multiply radical 3 times radical 3, and I get 3. So this was my first, this was my last. 5 minus 3 is 2. Okay? All right, here. So 7 times 7 is 49. It's always going to be minus because they have a positive times a negative. And you get 2. 49 minus 2 is 47. Look how easy that is when they're conjugates. All right, next one here. My first terms are going to give me 5. It's always minus. And 2 times 2 is 4. I get 1. Example 19. It says, remember an expression in simplest radical form is when the radical, the expression under the radical sign, the radicand, has no factors that can be raised to a power greater than or equal to the index, and there is no radical in the denominator. All right, how can we write a fraction in simplest radical form that has a radical in the denominator? All right, so this is called rationalizing a denominator. So in order for you to get rid of a radical in the denominator, it's against like the math law. You cannot leave this like this. You're going to multiply the top and the bottom by that radical. So if I want to get rid of that radical 3, let me write that out better so you guys can see it. I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by radical 3. The bottom, super easy. Radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. And look, we've done our job. We got rid of the radical in a denominator. And the top is 9 times radical 3. The very last step is the outies. Only these ones that are single on the outside can reduce. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so my answer is 3 radical 3. It does not matter if there's a radical in the numerator. It's only against the math law to have them in the denominator. Okay? Now this next one's a little bit different. Okay? Anytime there's a plus and a minus, you have to multiply by its conjugate. Okay? You have to multiply by its conjugate. So I have to multiply the top and the bottom by 5 minus radical 3. By 5 minus radical 3. And because these are conjugates, you know the shortcut. You only have to do first and last. So the first is going to give me 25. It'll always be minus because one's positive and one's negative. And radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. So 25 minus 3, I'm going to get a 22. Okay, so my denominator there is going to be 22. Now up top, I have to distribute. So I'm going to get 35 minus 7 radical 3. Now the only thing you have to be careful with is you just have to make sure everything's reduced. Okay? Just make sure everything's reduced. So, what did I do wrong here? Oh no, I'm okay. The only thing I'd be careful is like up here at the top, I could technically factor out a 7, and I'd be left with 5 minus radical 3, but then the 7 and the 22 don't reduce, so technically you could stop, you could leave it like this, okay, so all I did was do a GCF up top, or 35 minus 7 radical 3 over 22 is also accepted as your answer, okay, again, because 35 and 22 nothing reduces, and 7 and 22 nothing reduces. Okay, example 22. All right, again, now this is a little bit different. It's multiplication. So you can just multiply the top and the bottom by radical 5. On the bottom, you have 2, and then radical 5 times radical 5 would be 5, and 2 times 5, you're going to get 10. So my new denominator is just a 10. Up top, 5 times radical 5 is 5 radical 5. So carry that over. But again, these can reduce on the outside. 5 out of 10 would be a half. So rather than me putting that imaginary 1 up top, I mean, you're okay if you put that 1 up there. You're going to get radical 5 over 2. Okay, remember, radicals can't be in the denominator, but numerator's okay. Now this one, because there's a plus or minus, you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by its conjugate. So conjugate means you're going to change the middle sign only. So it's 2 plus radical 3. But what you do to the bottom, you do have to do to the top. Alright, so now distributing these. Okay, so 5 times radical 3 is going to be 5 radical 3. And I have a positive sign. And then you get 2 times, and it's radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. Okay, we'll clean that up. And my numerator is going to be 5 radical 3 plus 6. Okay? On the bottom, because they're conjugates, you only have to do first and last. Okay? First, I'm going to get a 25. In my last, I get a negative sign, because it's one's positive, one's negative. I have 2 times 2 is 4. And then radical 3 times radical 3 is just 3. So I'm going to end up with 25 minus 12. Okay, so I'm going to get 5 radical 3 plus 6 over 13. And again, just make sure 5 and 13 don't reduce, or 6 and 13. Okay? Example C. I would first rewrite that as a fraction. So that's 6 minus square root of 7 all over 5 minus square root of 7. Okay, so we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by its conjugate. So 5 plus radical 7. And then the top by that same 5 plus radical 7. Shortcut on the bottom, pretty easy. You're going to do first, you get 25. minus, in your last, radical 7 times radical 7 is 7. And then I get 25 minus 7, and it's going to get 18. I'm going to get an 18. All right, the top, there's no shortcuts. I have to FOIL that whole thing out. So first terms I get 30. Outers I get plus 6 radical 7. Inners I get minus 5 radical 7. And then my last, it's radical 7 times radical 7 is 7. Okay, now these combine. 30 take away 7 is 23. And then I have these combined. It's 6 radical 7 take away 5 radical 7, which is just 1 radical 7, but I put plus radical 7. Did I do that right? Yep. Okay, last one. Multiply the top and the bottom by its conjugate. So it's radical 3 plus 5. And this one's radical 3 plus 5. All right, on the bottom, first and last. So first is going to give me 3 minus 25. 3 minus 25 is going to be negative 22. Okay, we'll talk about leaving that negative in the denominator in a minute. Up top, there's no shortcut. You have to FOIL. Radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. That's my first. My outers would be 5 radical 3. My inners would be 5 radical 3. And my last is 25. Okay, so now I'm going to combine like terms. 3 and 25, I get 28. Okay, and then I have 5 radical 3 plus 5 radical 3 is 10 radical 3. Okay, what I would do, because there's this negative, you change all the signs up top. So you're going to get negative 28 minus 10 radical 3 over 22. You don't want to leave that negative on the bottom. Okay, you could pull the negative way out front and just use parentheses. All right, last thing is I'm going to take out the GCF here. I'm going to take out a GCF of 2. So I could take out a 2. So you have a negative 2. Take out a negative 2, I'm going to get 14 plus 5 radical 3. And again, just dividing it by 2 all over 22. And you're going to see that this and this cancel. So I have a negative on the outside, and I have 14 plus 5 radical 3 all over 11. And that's my final answer.